All right, looks like we are at 5. So I know that we have a lot of people here who are very busy, so I'll just try and let's try and get this started on time. So for those attendees here so far, thanks so much for signing up for this. It should be a cool panel. Should be hopefully we have some good questions and you guys learn some stuff. And I know that I suspect that we will, just because of the caliber of the panelists that we have here. So this is the Tampa. They're like the Tampa is the B2B marketers. I don't know what they call it. I still just call it the Tampa Pardot user group. I mean, there's like a big long word for it now, but so I run the Tampa Pardot user group here in Florida. It's kind of since COVID, this has become kind of a borderless user group. I've had other people on from other places, and it seems to work. So while I like to have people from the area on, I also want to go outside of that and bring on people who I think can bring some value. So yes, this is the Pardot Career Path the Pardot Career Path panel for more specifically geared towards marketing ops, internal Pardot people who work, whether it's in B2B or B2C. And this is our little agenda here. It's going to mostly just be answering questions and things of that nature. First, let's go back for a second. So, actually, never mind. I'm sorry. Let's do this. So let's do some introductions here for our panelists. This is everybody here who's going to be sharing some of their wisdom and answering some of your questions. So I think let's just start at the top. Let's go with Stephen.
Yeah, my name is Stephen Stouffer. I am the MoPros community Pardot chairperson. You've seen me in lots of different Slack accounts, like the Pardashians, which is Sarah's account. I did the math, and I've been working with Pardot for almost 9 years. So back when it was an orange logo under Exact Target, I think Laura and
orange and blue, orange and purple, orange and blue, orange and blue.
Orange and blue, I think. It was like the triangle with the arrows.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pardot.
Yeah, I know. So I've been in the space for quite a while, and I've held a lot of different roles, which I'm excited to kind of dive into. So if anyone has any questions from seeing that transition or anything, throw them in the chat. But yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Thank you. And let's go next with Andrew. Is Andrew here? Did he leave? He might not be here anymore. Okay. Hopefully he comes back. Let's go to Laura.
Hey everyone, I'm Laura Black. Similar to Stephen, I've been with Pardot for so long, since December 2011. That's when we onboarded Pardot, my former company. I like to say I'm so old in Pardot years that I remember when page actions could finally use wildcards. We were super excited. We could go all day comparing. We remember we're so old in Pardot years. I've been a consultant. I've been an end user. I've been a big contributor to the Pardot community. I love the Pardashian Slack channel. Thank you, Sarah. Kudos to Sarah. I'm happy to be here, talk to everyone about marketing ops, marketing automation, and where your career might take you with Pardot.
Awesome. Thank you. Sarah, who's already been name checked twice already.
No one tell anyone that I'm part of that group. It's a secret now. It's a secret. Yes, I am Sarah McNamara. I currently work in marketing technology at Slack. I am known for my Pardot work. I'm trying to think how many years it's been now. I think maybe like 7 years, something like that. So I'm not quite as much of an OG as I think Stephen, but some of the other folks in this call, but hope to really share. I feel like we've all taken really unique paths and have different advice to share on different situations. So looking forward to the conversation.
All right, Andrew is back with us. So Andrew, if you wouldn't mind, do doing a little intro of yourself?
Yeah, sure. Sorry about that. I was having some tech issues. Andrew Epperting, Senior PM, Senior Marketing Operations Manager at Amazon Business. I've been working in Pardot for about 10, 11 years, been in the ecosystem for 12. I've worked across a variety of different areas where, marketing, automation, operations come into play. So being on the front end from demand gen to lead gen, but primarily a body of my career has been on the back end from the operations side, and wearing that hybrid hat from both marketing operations and sales operations. I like that component. I get more interested on building and doing things, deploying things from that angle. So I always have tried to tune my career to be associated with that.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And now let's do Brittany.
Hi, everyone. My name is Brittany Rime. I'm a B2B marketer at Restaurant 365 on the demand gen team as a marketing campaigns manager. Bringing up the rear here with Pardot admin years, but I've been an admin for 5 years. And I'm a huge fan of Pardot and happy to be here.
Thank you. And batting cleanup, we have Julia. Go ahead.
Hi, everyone. This is Julia Park. I'm a Pardot solution engineer at Salesforce. So it's my job to sell Pardot to all these panelists. And I've been a pre-sales solutions engineer, solutions consultant. It's a technical trusted advisor to both customers and internal sales counterparts. And I would say I am a noob in terms of Pardot compared to the panelists. I've done Pardot for 3 years, but I've consulted for marketing technology about 7 years. So I'm really excited to be here today.
Yeah, absolutely. I was really happy that we were able to get you to join this, just because you offer I feel like you offer kind of a unique perspective, and some of the skills that you have as a solution engineer are certainly transferable for somebody who's in marketing technology as whether they're basically as someone trying to build a solution or trying to sell a solution or sell a story to an executive, trying to help them understand, here's the solution that you asked for and here's what that would look like. And so I'm hopeful that we'll get some questions either from the attendees, or I've got a few that I'll also ask as well. So thank you, everybody, for your intros. I do want to just make a note that while these people are all very successful in their own right, I don't want anybody to take their advice as this because Laura said it or Steven said it, this is something that's going to get me a job. There is no guarantees offered from the advice that you may get or things that people may say here, so please don't take it that way. It's more just to share their insights and their experiences and their careers that will hopefully help you in your path. They may say something that may a light may turn on. You're like, oh, I didn't really consider going that way or thinking about it in that way. So that's the idea. I just wanted to kind of level set there before we kind of dove into some of the questions. So yeah, this is basically, yes, we have people here who are in these roles, and they're going to talk about, to the extent that they can, talk about their current roles, how either current or past, how they've used Pardot, and expand a bit on some of the things that have been expected of them, skills that they've had to either acquire or just what their leaders have looked to them for. That's meant to kind of give you a sense of the kind of things that people, if you were to be in a role like this, the kind of things that would be expected of you. So it's less of if you were to become a marketing automation person in a company, and you would hopefully have a little better sense of the kind of things that person would be expected to do, whether it's that or it's also in solution engineering, which is certainly also a path. Before I dig into this, I do want to let you know this is the first of 4 panels that I'm putting together. These are tentative dates, so it'll be a similar setup, but it's going to be for education and higher ed, Pardot career paths in that space. I'm also going to do one for people who are in the consulting space, talking a bit about whether they're an independent or they work for a Salesforce partner, what that path is like, what that role is like, and then going to close it out with specifically around nonprofits. Pardot is pretty popular and has definitely a lot of really strong use cases in the nonprofit industry and nonprofit kind of verticals because there are many verticals in nonprofits. And so I've got some pretty cool panelists rather who've kind of signed on to do that. So I'm pretty excited. And then as I'll post about those as I get more firmed up on the dates and some of the panelists. So with that, we're going to roll into some panel questions. I mentioned in the chat, but if you go into the chat and you hover over to the left, or to the right rather, there's a Q&A tab. Feel free to use that if you want to post questions to a specific person. Otherwise, I have a few questions that I've kind of lined up to kind of get things started. And we did actually have, there was a pre-submitted question that I want to kind of honor the fact that this question came in ahead of time and try and get these here. So this isn't necessarily directed to any one person, but there are two topics here that I'm curious about how you guys see it. First, around kind of moonlighting or kind of having side hustles in outside of your day job as a marketing ops or marketing automation professional, and then also around the role of acquiring certifications, both Salesforce and other tools. So the first question is going to be around pricing yourself as a contractor. Let's say and this could be either you are in a role right now and you were just wanting to add to have another income stream, or you're somebody who's trying to break into marketing ops or marketing automation, but you may not necessarily have the resume for it yet, so you're trying to find opportunities. If anyone wants to kind of take this one around how you price yourself as a contractor, because there can be a fine line between pitching too high and too low, and the things that says about you, about your skill set, about your experience, and things like that. Would anyone like to take a crack at that one?
Yeah, I mean,
I would say.
Oh, go ahead.
No, you got it first.
Oh, great. I mean, out of the gate, I would say between 150 and 200 is typically my go-to. But there's a difference between a one-off project and then a retainer as well. And then I would say too, you need to kind of sell the value of what you're doing. So the scope of work, whatever it is, and also understand that agencies out there are charging $200 to $400 an hour for work. So knowing that that's your competition, making yourself more available and selling the idea of like, hey, look, I'm going to give you a lot more one-on-one time, a lot more personalized, work with you closer than maybe what an agency would do, where you kind of might get lost in the shuffle. So I think it's one, pricing it based on your experience and the value you bring, as well as making sure that you sell the value that you bring. Because one of the most overlooked things that I see is a client might ask for your dollar amount and you say, okay, 150 an hour. But very rarely do I see someone kind of backing that up and say, oh, well, not only going to provide you like an email template, I'm gonna push it through email and Acid or Litmus and push it through 120 different browsers, and like, this is what you can expect from my work. That's the piece I feel like is mostly missing. But when it comes to the dollar amount, I mean, you can kind of match up what you're doing, the level of effort, as well as your experience. But I've typically charged anywhere between 100 and 200, 200 being kind of on the upper end. So
cool.
I would say some of the biggest pieces of advice I always try to give people is don't take clients that lowball you unless you really are in a place where you don't feel like you necessarily have the level of experience and you want to learn. So like there's a huge benefit to you that maybe isn't monetary, but you want that experience and you're like trying to start from somewhere. But other than that scenario, don't take cheap clients because they always want the most and they always want to pay the least, and it'll become a nightmare. My other advice is charge for the first month up front. So don't do any work until they pay the first month. just to make sure that you don't end up in the red where you're like chasing after people you've already done, a few hours of work, and that will kind of set the tone. If they struggle to do that, then I would start to worry that their accounting isn't very good or that they're shady or something like that. My last piece of advice would be, like, I often get people who approach me with, hey, I'm switching from Marketo to Pardot, and maybe this person, like, I had a marketing operations manager, but they left the company, and I need this in place by like next week. I need this migration. That is a huge red flag. Do not do that. That will just be painful. They probably will be slow to pay you and quick to like have expectations. I just would always view that as a red flag. And certainly if you want to sign up for something like that, just charge a lot, because it's worth a lot to be able to like jump into something that quickly and to be able to address it and help that person out. Obviously they got themselves in a spot where someone, gave notice for 2 weeks and they aren't finding someone until way later.
Yeah, I think
Awesome.
I think maybe just to add on to that too, making it as simple as possible for the clients that are coming to you. So t-shirt sizing your offerings. So one, looking at the size of their stack, how big their instance is, what tier of their instance that they're working on. To your call out, Sarah, if they're migrating, there are some complexities around that as well. So throughout my career, whenever I've done consulting on the side, I've had set buckets of what I can provide out of the box, as well as offering a custom package, again, depending on how customized their stack or instance is. I think that's particularly something that's pretty vital as well to keep in mind when you might potentially be working with an enterprise client versus someone that's on the SMB side. So having that flexibility as well as trying to sell yourself that you've been thoughtful about the offerings that you can put to market, and just makes you that more viable of a candidate to potentially win the job.
Awesome. Thank you, Andrew, Stephen, and Sarah. So another pre-submitted question was around the role of certification. So as you guys know, the Pardot, Salesforce certifications, people can sometimes treat them a bit like Pokemon. They're just going to collect them all, and then that kind of throws into question the validity or the usefulness of the certifications. But as somebody who is thinking about it in terms of somebody who is, let's just put it and say someone who's maybe like a marketing specialist, someone who's maybe trying to kind of level up in their career, is there a place where the certifications, where, like, if you were to say, okay, what certifications should I be looking at if, let's say, I'm in marketing ops or in a lower level marketing ops role and I want to level up into a more of like a marketing ops manager or a martech manager? What is like the formula that you might use in your head to say, okay, there's dozens of certs out there. What am I going to focus on? So I think let's see. So let's ask Brittany. I don't know, Brittany, if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think for me, I got my Pardot cert, my specialist cert back in 2018. And it built my confidence at my internal role on the marketing team for sure. After I put that on my LinkedIn, I was getting blown up by recruiters. And that's when Pardot was really hitting stride too. So I think for me, the Pardot marketing specialist cert was my first stepping stone to really expanding my horizons. Now I want to move into my Salesforce admin cert and a couple other ones. So, and I was a marketing specialist at the time. So now I'm a marketing campaign manager. So I think it's helped me grow on internal marketing teams for sure.
Yeah, I think it could sometimes lend some I guess credibility and some legitimacy to say, oh yeah, no, this person just got their specialist cert. Like I'd been in Pardot for a few years and I was out for a bit, and then I took a job that was Pardot again, and my job offer was contingent on me taking and passing the specialist cert. Like they wouldn't, like if I didn't pass it, they would have just taken it away. So sorry. So that's, it was interesting that kind of dynamic was really interesting to me, because it implied a level of value to that cert internally at the organization that I hadn't really considered. And then seeing it, like when I passed my consultant cert, and it being like the word kind of getting around where I work, suddenly it's like, oh man, Ben has all the Pardot certs, and that's a big deal, and da. And it was just interesting because I didn't really think about how that conveyed internally, like what that, for people who maybe are not like the people on this panel who are like so in tune to the actual, like the industry, and they start saying, oh, certs are just literally, they're hard, but they're not like, it's not nearly as big of a deal as it starts sounding internally to people, and say, oh, Ben is, or whoever is Pardot is 2x Pardot certified. That becomes kind of this, like, it adds this level of legitimacy it was very interesting to me. So I think, Brittany, yeah, that you definitely have a point.
I'm going to jump in.
Okay.
I'm going to jump in and say, working in a marketing team is different than working in a consulting company. In a consulting company, they make their bread and butter based on how many certifications you have. They get higher ratings in the partner app exchange based on how many certifications their consultants have. So if you have 20 certifications, even that's spread across 5 people, your consulting partnership with Salesforce gets rated higher. It is more likely to get referrals from Salesforce AEs, and you're more likely to book business the more consultants you have with certifications. So that's not a bad thing. They are intended to be hard to pass, difficult to pass. They are intended to measure how well you understand the materials. And in the Pardot certification specifically, I find that it's very hard to get somebody to pass it who hasn't used Pardot for 6+ months. And when I taught a certification course for the free group, I would not take anyone who didn't already have 6+ months of Pardot hands-on experience, because teaching them off of Trailhead just wasn't going to happen. But when you come to the private side, when you go client side, you're no longer in a consulting company, your VPs of marketing, they don't really understand what a Salesforce certification is. So to be able to point to, I have X years of experience building something in Pardot, you want to kind of name, you want to craft your resume to speak to, what did you accomplish with Pardot? I launched 5 engagement studio programs for 2 different products. Talk about your accomplishments. It really just depends on what kind of job you're looking to get. Are you looking to be client side, or are you looking to be consultant side?
Yeah, and I'll add too to that I think certifications, the impact of them is greater when you're more junior or more new to the space, because if you don't have that history with Pardot where you can't point to your success of doing things, and you're like maybe a junior specialist where you've only been in there for a couple of months or under a year, if you're applying for a job and it's between you and someone else with junior experience and you have a certification, I can guarantee you that that's going to play a role in whether or not you get hired early on. But if you're 4 years in, 5 years in, like a lot of us, we're not necessarily pointing to certs. We're pointing to what we've done and the builds that we've been able to do. So it's more of our accomplishments than necessarily certs. So I could see the value kind of diminishing over time.
It
I'm going to throw a
absolutely
wrench in
is.
there and just say I 100% agree. The only other sector where I would say that I see that it makes a difference is in the enterprise sector, where they don't really have time or the internal resources to gauge your experience.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, depending on the sector, it can be seen as like insurance too, or like for SOX compliance. So I've been in scenarios, because I'm Salesforce admin certified, I can be an admin in a Salesforce instance in an internal, company, whereas, others are not able to, even if they have Salesforce experience, because the company, if you think about like a Google, it's like they just want to be able to say everyone who's in Salesforce is Salesforce certified, and that's their way of, kind of gauging if people are qualified to be in there.
I want to reiterate Stephen's point that if it's between 2 people of equal experience levels, and on paper one has a cert and one doesn't, the one with the cert is far more likely to get, the second interview.
Yeah, that is a great point. That does kind of, if it's just 2 people together, then that cert suggests it can imply a level of kind of, whether rightly or wrongly, a degree of kind of personal investment in that kind of, you've gone through the whatever trenches to get certified by Pardot. So that's a great point. I want to pivot to a question that I got in the Q&A early on. This one is actually for Julia. So this person asked said that they're looking at an SC role. They've been in marketing ops for a little while, but they're primarily focused on like workflow management versus customer and customer data. And this is from Sean Campbell. They want to know about the technical level of like how technically skilled does somebody need to be a successful solution engineer?
Yeah, I get this question quite a bit, and people have their different philosophies. And just a little bit of background about how I became a solution engineer. I was recruited out of college. There was a program built for new grads that wanted to be a sales account rep or a solution engineer. Just off the fact that I was an economics major, I was put in the sales engineering path. Like, you're technical, you know data, you're probably a good fit. I'm like, well, I actually applied for the sales role. So it's arbitrary. But, once I've been in this role, it does help to have some technical aptitude or technical curiosity. It is my personal philosophy that technology can be taught and the platform can be learned. So I put a far higher emphasis on the ability to interact with clients, be a great advocate for your customers, but also your internal sales resources, just having better communication skills. That's a little bit harder to learn, and it takes a bit more time to really craft. In terms of technology, especially with Pardot, if you're in marketing ops, really transferable skills. We actually have a team member who used to be a Pardot admin or just any marketing experience. It's really helpful to empathize with customers, and you're more of a trusted advisor versus someone just on the sales side. So I would say, don't worry about the technical piece. It does help to have that curiosity, but I think it can be learned.
All right, awesome, thank you. So I have another question from the Q&A. This one's for Brittany, asking about your advice to someone who's coming from a content marketing background, where using Pardot as part of a broader role, but now they want to focus or kind of pivot to be more focused on marketing automation. How do you become a marketing automation specialist while you're still building on kind of your knowledge of the platform?
Interesting. Okay, yeah. I think you're definitely in a good spot. Being a content writer in marketing is always going to be the most standalone skill and the most important skill as a marketer. So the fact that you want to learn Pardot and marketing automation is awesome. You can definitely do both at the same time. For me, I did a lot of Trailhead. I did a lot of internal learning from a teammate. But if you already know the product you're selling or you're marketing, you're at a total advantage. Because as a campaign manager, I'll do the first draft of an email and then I'll get held up because I need it approved by someone that knows the product better. So coming with that content marketing background, I think your goal of being a marketing automation specialist or pro, whatever you want to be, you're in a good spot, and it's just going to take time and you can pick it up.
So for somebody who's like with this person, they said that they're in a there is Pardot is involved in their day-to-day, but it's not their core responsibility. Whether Brittany or whomever wants to answer, for somebody who's kind of deciding that, because that's effectively kind of a career pivot. It's not a massive one, but it's definitely you're deciding that you, instead of being content marketing, because that's an entire discipline, saying, okay, I want to level up or kind of focus more on marketing automation. So there's things that this person can do in their day-to-day, but outside of their day-to-day, are there things that this person should consider, like other skills, other ancillary certifications, things like that would kind of grease the runway a bit to make that pivot happen a little faster or be a little smoother, because otherwise they're kind of relying on whatever it is that they're allowed to do in their current role, whereas there's so many learning opportunities that are available outside of their current role. What are some things that's for someone who's, let's say they're using Pardot, but it's not their day-to-day, but they want to kind of try and more aggressively pursue that as a career path? What are some things that they can do to develop some of their skills?
Well,
I would say networking and just like personal branding. Like I would reconfigure your resume to really show your experience and things that you're doing in the technology. But something that Brittany, I feel like, has done really well is like honestly, I forget a lot that she does like marketing campaigns. I feel like she's like part of the marketing operations group. But I think that has some like it says a lot about the way that she shows herself on social media. Like she definitely is in the Pardot space, shows expertise, clearly is like a subject matter expert in the area. So I think just getting involved in like the groups and the Slack groups that we have,
Twitter,
and just being a sponge. Twitter.
Awesome. All right. So thank you for that. So there was a question from Larry. Some of you probably know Larry Harvey. He's curious about those of us who've been on both sides of the table, have been internal resources and also have been consultants. So he wants to know what, for those who are, actually all of us are going to be, well, except for me, are going to be internal resources. What do you like or miss from being a consultant? Is there something that in your current role as an internal resource, you're like, man, this is what I wanted, but there's something about consulting that there's still something about it that I kind of miss. For those which should be Sarah, Laura, I think Andrew, and Stephen, is there anything about it that you're like, man, there's certain things that I do miss about consulting?
For me, the people and how many different systems and tools that you get to learn. That is one of the most valuable things that I had when I was a consultant, is just the exposure to all the different tools and different use cases that all the different kind of businesses kind of come. You get enterprise, you get startups, you get B2B, B2C, nonprofits. That is like one of the most invaluable experience points in my life, or my career rather. So yeah, I loved learning new things. I loved learning the different tools, and I loved learning how other people thought about problems and solutioning them out.
I agree. I really enjoyed meeting different people who were my clients, who hopefully I would have multi-month long conversations with them, maybe 5 hours a month at a time. I enjoyed seeing, what are the products that they build? How could I bring, prospect scoring categories to them? What are the tools that they used? How do they do their reporting? What do they care to report on? All those things were really eye-opening. Working with somebody from a bank is very different from somebody who works for a call center software company. The reason I went client side was that thing about sometimes you only had 5 hours a month with them. Like a lot of times the projects just weren't super advanced. The ones that were, I loved. I just, a lot of the day-to-day was, reteaching the same concepts. And that was not what I really enjoy seeing something where I help them build something from very small to really big and see it execute and evolve. And just as a consultant, you don't stay with somebody that long usually.
I miss being able to avoid politics. As a consultant, you can be like, oh yes, my point of contact can deal with this, not me. Internally, you're like, oh wait, that's me.
Yeah.
I have to do it.
I mean, that's something that I kind of enjoy as a consultant. I mean, I'm able to, I can give my advice, my 2 cents, and say, this is what I think you should do. And if you choose not to do it, then that's kind of sort of on you. Like I'll build it, and I'll tell you what I think is going to happen. And then, but if you say, no, I want to do it this way, I'm like, okay, I'll do it this way. And then I just toggle on to somebody else. I'm able to kind of like, there's some space between me and all the potentially internal chaos that happens in politics of a decision like that. Say, as kind of the hired hand, say, here's what I think you should do. And then if you say, nope, I don't want to do it, or let's do it this way instead, I can say, all right, it's on record. I said, I don't think you should do this, but I will do it. And then just say, all right, it's done, on to the next. And then kind of just put it out of my mind. So that is a benefit. You're able to kind of do what you need to do and then not have to deal with some of the internal mechanisms and politics that you have to deal with now as an internal part of a team.
I would say as a consultant, people also tend to value your time more because of the pricing model. It's like as a full-time employee, it's like you can easily have scope creep and have like a million meetings just talking about concepts of stuff. Whereas as a consultant, at least in my experience, you're seen as like a, it's like a cost per hour in a lot of cases, or a cost per month. And so, there's pressure internally to be prepared for the meeting, to only have a meeting if there's an agenda and there's a goal and it's being met. Whereas if you're a full-time employee, it's kind of like, well, we have 40 hours a week, so let's have a million meetings talking about concepts of stuff.
Steering committee. Let's have another steering committee. Awesome. Well, thank you for that. So there's some interesting conversations happening in the chat right now around some of the skills that'll help you with Pardot or any other marketing automation platform. So Laura said, suggested Google Analytics, Google Tag Manager, also the fundamentals, just being able to having a working knowledge of HTML and even CSS, because
those things will go everywhere. You'll always be valuable to marketing operations for the ability to make a quick edit to the website or not have to pull in your development team. And just they pay off if you don't need to go back to somebody like, hey, I need a slightly different crop on this image. Just being able to do some of these things will just make your work go smoother. And the ability to put that on a resume, again, it's going to be like the difference between two people of similar skill levels. Hey, this person can wear more hats. I'll pay them more and I want to hire them more than the other one.
Yeah, and I'd say too that there's a difference between doing something and doing something well. Understanding how HTML and tables work and how they're different in email than they are in landing pages, maybe learning Bootstrap, customizing forms with CSS. You can get an email out, but then getting it out well and making sure it's working well across multiple platforms. I think that's the difference between, more of a junior person versus someone who's a little bit more senior. So learning those is massive.
And don't imagine that you learn it all in one fell swoop. I am a CSS hack. I will never reach Stephen's level of familiarity with coding, with JavaScript, but I do really well with what I do. And then I know when to outsource something for help. Just because you don't know something, don't assume you have to know all of it. You build on what you learned before and just start somewhere. Start with the smallest thing. Hey, I don't quite understand what's going on with Google Tag Manager. I'm going to go play with it. Oh, this is how that works. Next time it's a little easier. Just build on it each time. I'm going to do something fancy with this email with dynamic content. Cool. Now I'm comfortable with that. I'll do it again in the future. Just build, start small, just start somewhere.
All great points. There was a question kind of going back to something that Stephen said around the idea of shadowing. So Stephen, in the chat, you said, going back to the question about working with Pardot and leaning into it, about talking to your manager. So there's a question about specifically around approaching. How do you approach that? Because Vanessa, she mentioned that it's something that she wants to do. But sometimes it's hard to figure out how to position that or justify that without feeling like you're kind of imposing on somebody, or you're kind of not. I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, so I wanted to go back to it because I think it would be remiss to not say, if you want to shift your career, you should be partnering with your manager. I hope that they're open to it, but you should have a dialogue, communicate to them that you're curious about Pardot. And I actually had a specialist who was more interested on the ops side for marketing automation. And she came to me and she was like, hey, look, in order to do my job better, I want to understand, in your case, the content. I want to understand how this content gets worked into these marketing programs. I want to understand how it's being integrated with our forms, with our emails, with our landing pages. I'm giving it to someone and I kind of lose sight of where it's going and how it's being used. I do not anticipate any managers telling you, no, I don't want you to understand how your content's being used and disseminated across all the different platforms and all the different tools. I mean, that's what I would do as a manager. If someone came to me and asked me that, I'd be like, oh my goodness, yes. Spend 2 hours Friday job shadowing someone, whatever it takes for your job to become easier, or for you to get additional insight into maybe a different area or career path that you might want to go. Because I would want a subordinate to come to me to have that dialogue with me, because that tells me that they're thinking about growth or thinking about how they can better serve the company and the organization. But that's also just my take.
So Stephen, as a counterpoint to that, so I wonder if that approach, I mean, I totally agree, but I wonder if that approach is something that is more is an easier sell in maybe a smaller organization where they may see you as, okay, this is somebody who wants to learn, and we're a little more nimble. I'm envisioning having that conversation with with your manager at at a massive firm, and they're like, yeah, no, we need 40 hours a week out of you to do
Yeah,
this.
if you're concerned about that, I'd go back to what I think Sarah pointed out, where partner with someone in a community like the Pardashians or something who uses Pardot on a day-to-day, and maybe shadow them and find someone that you can partner with and have them be kind of your career coach within the industry. There's a lot you can do, but just figuring out those few things and someone who's done it, have them kind of help you and guide you and be your mentor in that area. I think that would be key.
Another thing to consider is as you go further along in your career, you get less of like your manager dictating what you do and you get more free time. Managers frequently are like, bring me what do you want to learn this year? You want to take a class, you want to, move towards this certification. Cool. What does it take on my end to get you this Pardot certification? Maybe it's a paid class from Salesforce, maybe it's a free course, maybe it's Salesforce Saturdays, maybe it's, any number of things. And somewhat it depends on how far along you are in your career, how much money they'll put towards it. But a lot of companies have education, as a line item that they're willing, maybe they won't give you a raise, but they'll pay for a class for you. So don't be afraid to approach your boss. And then that is paid time during the day. You aren't expected to use your PTO to go pursue that class. You are on the clock doing that training. So make sure you have that conversation. Like, hey, I learned about this class, and I want to do this, and then I want to take this certification. Making sure you have that conversation with your boss. If your boss is not open to it, you might want to consider changing jobs, because that's probably not a place you want to be super long. But good companies do invest in you and your education and your career because they want to keep you.
So I want to kind of pivot again. We've been talking a lot about technology and things like that, and something that I've talked to people who are kind of in the marketing technology space, marketing ops, people who are kind of technologically minded and are also kind of ascending in their roles and responsibilities and are interfacing with more people who are kind of more senior leaders. It's a learned skill to be able to speak to your audience. It's something that I've struggled with, where I am very comfortable in the minutia, in the technical details, and to me it's not a big deal. It's just like, yeah, talking about this, and people's eyes start to glaze over, and that can be kind of a limiter to your ability to move up into your next career, into whatever that next level is, if you can't take technical requirements, technical elements of a complex campaign or complex integration and distill it in a way that is understandable and consumable by people who are not themselves technologists. And this is a question I want to ask. I'm going to kind of put this to let's talk to Sarah, but I also first I want to ask Julia. So you in your role as an SE, you are presenting a solution to people who are considering buying Pardot, and you've already had conversations about the requirements and things like that, and now you have to then present the solution to them. Like, here's how Pardot can do this. You're not necessarily doing the technical heavy lifting, but what I'm curious is if you could share some things that you've learned along the way that enable you to learn how to tell the story succinctly and completely without getting trapped or getting bogged down in the kind of overly technical details for an audience that may not be as sophisticated.
Yeah, sure. And this is a constant battle, even for myself. It's typically, if I get caught off guard, I tend to ramble, and this is just human nature to default back to what you know, which is the technology and the technical solution. But that's why the storytelling aspect is so important. It helps engage the audience, but it also helps everybody get on the same language. It's like, explain this concept to a second grader. Explain this concept to your grandmother. Like, the way that you explain concepts is through analogies and stories, because that's the easiest way for people to get on the same page as quickly as possible. So I say storytelling is definitely a part of the presentation skills. Some other things that I've learned is just the presentation technique of tell, show, tell. You tell the audience what you're going to cover, pause, and then you show what you're going to show, pause, and then you end with that closing tell, which is summarizing what we just covered and then tying back to the so what? Why do you care about what I'm talking about? And that format, you can use it in kind of the entire presentation. I'm gonna start with agenda, then show the presentation and close, but also feature by feature. If we're gonna go start with the homepage, let's intro the concept of why a single platform, why is a single sign-on experience important, and then go through those motions. Some things I've learned about myself is I tend to extend my sentences at certain times with a lot of filler words. So I will physically block my mouth. If I say something really technical, I will stop, cover my mouth, and then let the uncomfortable pause settle in. Your AE.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, I learned this from one of my solution architects at a former AI company. We were selling brand new cutting edge technology in the AI ABM space, and nobody knows what that is. But the more you ramble about models and regressions, no one's gonna follow you. So just cover your mouth. Your AE is gonna try and break the silence, but it's important for your audience to have enough space to think and respond to whatever you're trying to explain.
That's a great point, because it's very easy just to kind of bowl people over intellectually with information, especially if you are somebody who's in Pardot and you're like, yeah, connected campaigns are going to put this thing in, and you're just like, suddenly you're just in like a groove. I mean, I'm sure we've all been in that groove. We're trying to explain something to somebody, and you suddenly realize, like, wait a second, I'm not sure they actually understood most of what I just said, because I just kind of like get this in this zone. And so I think that's really interesting, especially as you're trying to level up. And like I said, this is something that I've struggled with, and looks like others in the comments section have as well, where you just where you're talking, let's say your senior manager, your director, your CMO, somebody who's maybe not as in the weeds technology wise, and they need to understand how this is going to help them hit their numbers in a way that they can understand and consume. And kind of knowing how to distill what's important and what's not important. And I imagine that this is something that Sarah has also probably dealt with in her role, in her various roles. Same thing probably. I also imagine Andrew as well. So I'd be interested, Sarah and Andrew, if you had any kind of add-on thoughts to that.
I want to give Andrew a chance. Andrew, you got anything?
Yeah, I think you've kind of driven the theme home pretty succinctly, Ben, and just having that ability to, go back and forth on both sides of the fence. I think maybe to expand on that a little bit more also, and maybe this is more looking at the lens of maybe opportunities you are looking to, you're looking to explore from the role that you're in now, moving into a new role, kicking the tires on a new employer. Are they going to give you the flexibility and the freedom to be able to invest in what I like to loosely just call the nerd marketing, be able to be the technician if that's really where you want to reside, and then be able to extract that and boil it back down. There needs to be a level of excitement that I think that ultimately is able to translate into that requirement of being able to distill the output for the non-technical marketer or non-technical forward-facing user or stakeholder. So I think that's a variable that's also really important to keep in mind as well.
I agree, and I think like something that's a little bit different between like a sales motion and an internal technical person is there's the phase of just trying to understand what someone is looking for. Like especially when it comes to marketing operations, marketing might jump to, well, I need this tool, like I need this CDP. And it's like, well, like, okay, let's take a few steps back and figure out what is this person really looking for? Because more often than not, it's not the tool, It's that they're trying to get the tool to bail them out of something else that's bothering them, and it's like a few layers down, and maybe they don't even really understand exactly what it is. Like I've had marketers come to me and be like, I need this new landing page builder really badly because it's going to be self-serve. And in their mind, it's self-serve. But then when you have that conversation, you kind of learn to tease out, like psychologically, kind of what's bugging this person. It's like, well, actually, what they really like is this agency, or like the internal agency at this vendor who creates the landing pages for them. And what they're really frustrated with is maybe like the internal, web team or digital team, and how their SLAs are long. And it's like, so okay, so we don't need to buy the tool. Maybe we need to look into how do we get the SLAs to be a little bit shorter. Do we need to have another headcount for that team, or do we just want to hire like an agency or something like that? So that's really important, because you will waste a lot of time just buying stuff and implementing it just to discover that that isn't really the solution. You're just adding more tools to the problem. So really listening closely and taking time to be consultative, even internally, to understand the problem and not just take people's kind of words at face value.
That's an interesting point. So that you're in the example that you showed here. It's basically you're kind of, instead of being reactive, you're presenting yourself as a sort of a, not quite a buffer, but definitely somebody who's, if you have your CMO or you have your VP marketing, whatever, whoever this person is, and they say, hey, they read about CDP somewhere and they're like, oh man, this is awesome. We need a CDP. Why don't we have a CDP? Someone give me a write-up on the top 10 CDPs and what they cost. And then instead of being, and that's an opportunity, actually. If you're somebody who is in that position and they say, hey, CDP, great, let's go do it. You could actually stop and kind of start positioning yourself as kind of a trusted advisor in some ways to your leaders. Because instead of, it's not that you're not going to do it. Like, you're not saying, oh no, I'm not going to do this. You can elicit more information from them, saying, listen, I've actually done a little bit of research into CDPs, or I'm somewhat familiar. I would love to know what is it that you're wanting. Tease the requirements, and then be able to kind of guide the conversation in some ways. And you accumulate some internal credibility if you're able to position yourself that way, not as somebody who's not going to do the task, but as somebody who is able to help them understand what it is they actually want.
Perfect world,
because they may not know that.
If you're in touch with the market, which I try very hard to be, the reason being, usually you can kind of get your foot in the door early on some of those topics and help drive that narrative to a place where the marketer will get the right solution, not necessarily the solution that advertised to them first or got to them first. That you can, like you said, present to them, like, I've done my research, I'm involved in the market and knowledgeable. Here's what I think about these different vendors. I agree that is a much better relationship and much better for your career and the value that is being seen and on your behalf within the company.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's super important to Sarah's point. You're the tech person or part of the tech team or the visionaries that are trying to build out the vision conceptually for your organization. So having that trusted advisor component where you are keeping pulse of the market and the technologies that are, front and center, that are ultimately starting to become most popular and growing into the stack. Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that 100%.
That's awesome. All right, so we had another question. I have a couple questions in here, actually. So we kind of touched on this a little bit, but if there's anyone who has some other thoughts around leveling up from a more of a junior or specialist role into a kind of a marketing ops management role. And management, I use that term loosely because sometimes people will infer management to mean like people management, and that's often not the case in marketing ops. It's just kind of they just don't have a better word for it than manager. So I know that we've talked a bit about the idea of like investing in addition to trying to get your employer to invest in you, you've got to kind of invest in yourself. So think of yourself as somebody who's you're in this junior role. You're like, oh man, I really would love to get up to this next level. This is something that I recommend to some of my my mentees when they're thinking about, like the kind of roles that they want to get into and want to be qualified for, I tell them, think about what is the role that they want. And then if they say, I want to be in this case, let's say I want to be a marketing ops manager. What I tell them is, honestly, just go into LinkedIn and start searching the marketing ops manager. Don't focus in on a geography, just whether it's in your country or your state, and then start looking for trends. Start looking for whether it's skill trends or platform trends, things that successful candidates, they would like them to know. So, and that gives you a sense of the kind of tools that are out there that if you're wanting to level up and you say, okay, they're asking that people know GA, Google AdWords. They want them to know, they would like them to be certified if possible. So that's something to think about. And they also want them to know content marketing strategy or HTML and CSS. You start thinking, okay, I don't really know HTML and CSS, or I don't really know this or that. You can actually create a bit of a kind of a pathway forward for yourself by just looking at what other employers are asking for when they're looking for a marketing ops manager. You can find your own blind spots, your own weaknesses, and kind of devise a plan to kind of become that person. And that's why I tend to recommend is look for the trends, look for the things that you're seeing and everything, and say, all right, these are the ones that a lot of these organizations look for. So I need to pivot and level up by investing in myself, and also seeing if I can get my organization to also invest in me as well.
Something I'll add to job seeking is studies have shown that men and women job search in very, very different ways. And specifically, women tend to only apply to a position if they meet 100% of the bullet points on a job description. That is not reality, and men do not do that. So if you hit 80% of the bullet points there, apply for that, because what they're looking for when they put out those job descriptions and they put out those bullet points, that is their the perfect candidate, the unicorn that they know probably doesn't exist, but that is their ultimate wish list. If you hit 80% of those things, you're going to be a pretty decent candidate. And then talking about your resume, don't just talk about what you did, like sent emails weekly. It's not as cool as sent emails to 60,000 people and grew the newsletter size from 50,000 to 60,000 in 6 months. Talk about the actual numbers behind your accomplishments. But don't be afraid to make that application, even if you don't hit all of those bullet points.
I think that's really important, what Laura just called out. Show your quantifiables around what value you are bringing. Anybody can build an email, but what you ultimately did with that email or that engagement program or some really creative hack that you've been able to do with Pardot, that's the value that really sticks out, that shows that you conceptually are thinking outside of the box, trying to find those unique use cases, and you are going to be able to hit the ground running from day one.
And the jobs that I've enjoyed the most are the ones where they ask me, what was the coolest thing you built? And they were Pardot specific jobs, because I have gone, headfirst into Pardot as my specialty. But they are conversations. They're not something to be nervous about. You should feel comfortable. You should feel like you're testing out them. Am I a good fit for them as much as are they a good fit for me? And they are interested in what did you find engaging? What did you enjoy about building this? And hoping to find a fit with what you enjoy with what they're going to have day to day. And what could be your day to day, because just because they're asking for this today, they could be like, wow, this person can bring this other tool that we've only sort of heard about, but if we bring them on, we're definitely going to get that tool. So, don't be afraid.
Awesome. All right, so I have two questions. This one, I don't know where it went, if it was in the general chat or I think it may have been general chat, but someone asked about the idea of kind of deciding when the decision just to specialize in a platform. So I know that some of us on the call here have experience. I know that that Sarah has, I think Sarah's an MCA in Marketo. And I know that Brittany's done Marketo. I think you've also done Eloqua. And I've been in HubSpot is the only other one I've done. But for those, a lot of us on the phone here on this call rather seem to have kind of pivoted or kind of focused on on Pardot, and I'm curious to know kind of the pros and the cons of that. Because there's certainly a undercurrent of saying, oh well, in the interest of making myself as available as possible to all the jobs available, I'm just going to try and learn everything. I'm going to try to learn HubSpot, Marketo, Eloqua, Marketing Cloud, and Pardot. I'm going to try and learn them all. What is your kind of what are your guys' kind of POVs on that, of thinking about do you specialize, the pros and cons, or should you become kind of just functionally knowledgeable in other platforms? What's the thinking?
I think it's a mistake to specialize in just one platform. And let me clarify, I don't mean that on face value. I think it's good to go deep on tools and to be like that subject matter expert. But I think that you pigeonhole yourself if you only know one platform. And then it's interesting, I've spoken with executives about this, and they've run into, it's like someone will know Marketo through and through, but then you ask them about, like basic other concepts, like anything about integrations or just other, like any kind of other holistic skills, and apart. And that's a great way to never get promoted, right? Because they're like, well, this person's a perfect fit for this. We're never going to ask them to do anything else. So I think it's important, if you do specialize in, like I see Gilda saying, like dip your toes in everything. I think it's good to be deep, because I do think there's a lot of value there, and it's a great way to get your foot in the door and to be seen, like to show immediate value. But I think making sure that you have a more holistic, even if it's not another marketing automation platform, just a holistic skill set, so you can dabble in other areas and show that you're open to opportunities. Kind of like someone mentioned on like letting your manager know other interests that you have. So maybe other projects come up that aren't directly within Pardot, but are aligned, and maybe you can take ownership over that and expand your horizons in that way. I think it's important to at least portray that interest and to show that you have some knowledge in different areas. Because if you go too specialized, you pigeonhole yourself, and management very easily will be like, oh, this person must be really happy in what they're doing. I'm not going to ask them to do something else.
I'd be picked for promotions internally if all you do is this one thing.
I think it's good to know the industry landscape of all the tools and like where the industry is heading in terms of just general marketing automation platforms. But if you, like Sarah said, if you pigeonhole yourself and you all of a sudden get a new CMO and they want to rip out Pardot and put HubSpot, like you kind of have to be prepared for that and well-round yourself and stay up to date with like the industry standards of marketing automation.
Yeah, one of my favorite quotes is, "A jack of all trades is a master of none, but oftentimes a master of one is better than a master of none." So it's important to get visibility into other things, because I have a background in Marketo too, and there were so many things when I moved to Pardot that I was kind of frustrated with because of my experience within Marketo, and then eventually Pardot actually caught up to a few things, and then the tools were made available. And then someone actually asked a question about operations and kind of making those transitions. And I think getting visibility into lots of different systems or many different systems, you kind of get that logical next step into ops versus kind of being like a focused specialist in automation, in which case it might be a Marketo, a HubSpot, or a Pardot. But then once you kind of step back and get visibility into integrations and how things are connecting and how things is transferring between different systems, that's when you kind of have that logical next step into ops, which is how I kind of made that transition. And a few people that I know did as well.
Yeah,
Awesome. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. I'll close out on this really quick. I think having that Rolodex of different platforms and technologies that are really critical, particularly using the call out that Brittany threw out there. What if your company is acquiring another entity and they're on a different platform, and you are then tasked with consolidating or ingesting all of those records? Having that knowledge set to understand the different competing or different competition of the tracking cookies and the consent from one database to the next, and then having to go through that cycle, that is something that not everybody understands and would be able to put that really um, really big investment in the time to understand that. And so having, again, that wide understanding of the various platforms can be a benefit to you from that angle, having that in your back pocket.
So I want to pivot a little bit back to Julia, but within this kind of general concept, as somebody who is selling to Pardot 2 companies who will eventually probably either need to upskill their people internally or hire. Thinking about what you're hearing from the people that you're selling Pardot to, hearing about their concerns, their use cases, and kind of also taking what you've heard so far. I'm interested to know if there's anything that anything that you want to add, or that anything that kind of piqued that they made you go around your experiences with the people who are ultimately buying the software.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that comes to mind is, at least when we are trying to get people onto Pardot and they're familiar with a Marketo or a HubSpot, and there are going to be a couple end users that are really afraid of this change, and it's understandable. There's different buttons. Some are blue, some are purple, some are orange. But really, one of the things that are central is that core data structure. So because Pardot sits really central to Salesforce CRM, even myself, when I'm getting more familiar with Pardot and I want to be a better asset to my core team, my Salesforce core platform, I need to be better versed in how the core platform works and how the data works and how the data is evolving. We acquired Tableau, and our analytics platform is evolving, and eventually the Pardot platform is going to be coming closer to the core platform. So to be even a more valuable asset to Salesforce, I myself have to upskill on areas that are important to the overall business. And in my case, I'm working more on getting more familiar with just Salesforce Sales Cloud as a platform. So, I completely agree with everybody here. I'm a specialist. I am a specialist at Pardot in Salesforce, and I don't want to get pigeonholed either. So I myself have to get familiar with what are the tangential products, what other ways the marketers leverage, different tools within their own company to use Pardot to its max. And that's all I really had to add.
Thank you, Julia. That was very helpful. So this was a different kind of question, but it kind of goes back to the concept of kind of leveling up or moving into a new career, and so this person is curious about the differences between RevOps and marketing ops, and if you are leveling up, what should you aim for? Because those sit sometimes in they may not be in the same pod or the same area of desks. They may be, but they're certainly talking fairly often. And this is something that I think I know that Sarah is very close to this, and so I'd be interested to know if somebody is in marketing ops and they want to considering looking at RevOps. What are the related skill sets? What are the things that are that this person needs to learn? I'm really interested in your thoughts on this one, Sarah.
I was going to make the joke that when they find out, can they let me know? Because I feel like RevOps is like the new ABM or CDP, where suddenly everything is RevOps, so therefore nothing is RevOps. I think what's interesting is I think the aspirational definition is that sales operations and marketing operations will become one function and become more centralized and have its own representation at the C-suite level. But I think we're in kind of a weird spot right now where it seems like a lot of the revenue ops roles are sales operations focused, but they're branded as revenue ops. So it's almost like they're thinking revenue as in money, and so I guess it's sales. But then it was actually really, really interesting. I was talking with a peer the other day who has a revenue ops title, and they said that they were frustrated because they felt like a lot of the hiring managers out there want you to have a strong sales operations background, but then also have the marketing operations expertise, but then not pay for both. It's almost like it's an attempt to get both of the experience under one person and hopefully one paycheck. So I think it's in that stage where it's still trying to be defined, and there's still kind of like a roadmap being built for it. I am seeing, like, I'll speak for myself. I'm in a position where I definitely kind of span over some sales operations, and then, but my focus is marketing operations. So I have that experience in both, but I wouldn't say that that industry is at the level of maturity where, like, I would actually get that title. I don't think that that's become mainstream yet, only on the sales operations side for some reason.
So for those that are curious about what RevOps are, I'm type that into Google to see if I can find something interesting, something that sounds good or sounds like it might be right. And so this is calling it a centralized function that consolidates historically siloed operational teams. So sales ops, marketing ops, customer success ops, and systems. So basically, it's anything. RevOps is responsible for the processes, systems, and data that their client functions sees every day, client or company. It's basically anything that is revenue facing, that is revenue generation facing. That's a very broad way to look at it. I don't know if it's right or not, but it's interesting that as these titles are evolving and people who are as like the more, because marketing ops and sales ops have been around for, I feel like, a little longer than the traditional term of marketing ops. It's kind of been evolving, and I'm really curious to see this kind of I can see it kind of being a blend of like people who are really interested in the sales side, really likes but they also are interested in the marketing ops side, so they kind of become this sort of revenue ops person who's just interested in straddling kind of both sides of that world. But it is so new that I think that it's hard to pin down what exactly that path would be like to go from marketing ops or sales ops to rev ops. Because I think really the only the more and then there's biz ops. Yeah, Julia, that's right.
I think the struggle is going to be, because someone actually, I think, pointed out in the chat, is that if you put the operations groups under, like, not under sales or marketing, it's seen as a sunken cost, not as a revenue generating cost. Whereas I do think that marketing operations generally does better when it sits under the CMO, because marketing gets money, right? It's not seen as because IT, it's like the strategy is get the cost down as low as possible. It's not usually seen as strategic. So they don't want to invest in it. It's kind of like just try to get people who can just close tickets, and that's it. So that would be my concern with trying to bring it all together under something that isn't marketing or sales. And maybe that answers the question as to why it seems to be centralized under sales right now. Because in my experience, when you go under IT, it's just cost cutting galore. So I would warn against that is a struggle that I think will be faced if they try to put it under like IT or biz ops.
I once had a manager very, very early in my career. I once had a manager tell me, if you're not sales, you're overhead. And so that suggests that any of those, like if you put us under IT, yeah, they're looking to trim it, exactly like Sarah said. So if you can be under the sales platform, sales is making you money, more money for you to spend.
Yeah, that's a. I mean, I've been in similar situations where it was in a large health system, and marketing was seen as a loss leader. They're basically just all marketing does is lose money. It's just they cost us. They don't generate. It's like, well, then it generates all kinds of questions in me now. Not that I didn't think about then, but it's really curious. So one thing that I wanted to kind of look at is around some of and we've talked about a little bit in other parts of this conversation around kind of ancillary skills, ancillary tools. And one thing that's kind of piggyback on something that Laura said around data being king, and it is king. This is something that if you're wanting to level up in your career, if you want to level up in marketing ops, figuring out, learning APIs. I mean, that's super technical, but it's having some of these skill sets that are becoming increasingly important, especially for Pardot. Because Pardot's default kind of engagement and ingestions it's somewhat limited. I mean, but if you know APIs, if you understand the API, you can suggest other solutions. And Andrew, I know that in your role currently and otherwise, you've kind of been responsible for things like third-party integrations and the data push and pull between Pardot and other tools at Amazon. And I know you can't necessarily speak to what you've done at Amazon, but more generally, if you're able to kind of touch on a bit more around things that someone should consider focusing on if they're wanting to kind of become more familiar with the I don't know if you want to call it data ops. I don't think that's a thing, but like the data integrations, the push and pulls of these third-party applications and databases, some things that people should think about if they're wanting to kind of grow those skills.
Yeah, I think, APIs are certainly very important in understanding what they can or cannot do. But in that too, APIs are starting to get a little bit long in the tooth as well, because you have to foster them, you have to take care of them. There is some hand holding to make sure that they continue to operate as expected. And, like most other things, just like your smartphone, there's going to be iterations that come out time over time over time. With that, you are burning cycles to maintain that. So looking at what's next from that integration perspective. So looking at technologies like iPaaS, that's really intended to act as that middleware layer, be able to set that standard for, goldening up your making golden records. I guess that would be the better way to phrase that. And then how that ultimately impacts all of the data sources that are coming into that middleware layer, so it's getting pushed into the map. So looking at things like Gartner, understanding what's pushing the new limitations of what can be done with data today. And not only is data king, not only does that enable us to be able to do our jobs day in and day out, but also it opens up the opportunity for you to sort of govern a little bit. As more and more things crop up in the news, more purview and sensitivity around PII is also very, very important. So how can you ensure that your integrations are thoughtful and they are performing at a good clip, but also making sure that there are no exposures or vulnerabilities to how you're sharing data across solutions or platform within your stack?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, and that's some of the things that you said. I'm sure people who are listening who maybe are not so data focused may feel a little kind of overwhelmed just by what you've even said, and that's totally understandable because it's not an area that. What's that?
I went into the matrix there a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit, and that's fine. But marketers, people who are specializing, or people who are in marketing operations, I would argue, and I think probably a lot of people on the phone or on this call would agree that having at least a foundational knowledge of kind of databases 101 of how APIs work. You don't necessarily have to be a SQL wizard, but it wouldn't hurt to understand what a SQL query looks like. Because these are things that as you advance in your career and especially as you grow into more mature or complex organizations, they're going to look at you and say, all right, well, you've been doing this for a while. I assume that you understand how the APIs integrate. And you're like, actually, I don't. And that becomes kind of a bit of a blind spot for you. So I'm not suggesting that you need to become an integrations guru, but it can certainly make up for other areas if you say, all right, I'm not great at coding emails, but I am very skilled when it comes to developing integrations. Plus, I know how to do other things. Being an integration, someone who knows integrations, especially as more and more third-party apps start popping up, and let's say the company that you work at decides that they're going to buy this other tool and say, all right, we need to find a way to ingest this in the Pardot. It's not there's no way for me to get it using the default stuff, and they haven't built an integration, but the people who I work with really want it. So it becomes kind of incumbent on you to figure out a way to bring it in. And that's something that is a skill that that you would kind of find yourself needing to learn?
Well, there's layers too, right? Like you don't have to be a Mike Cruiser for those who know who that is, who's an API genius. There's microservices like Andrew was talking about that sit between two different services. There's like the trade.ios, there's the Zapiers, if this then that you can leverage to get data from point A to point B. But also, like Andrew pointed out, I'll just reiterate, it's something you have to manage. So when Pardot decides to upgrade from 3.0 to 4.0, or they change the way that they're authenticating the API, that's stuff that you have to manage and you have to keep up with. So while it's great from a customization standpoint, you're telling the director of whatever, yes, I can do that, but in 6 months from now, is it going to still work? So it's a cost-benefit analysis, but there's definitely tools out there that I think can give the average user access to the API without needing to know the ins and outs.
I feel like SSO is the new AMC. It's like the new dirty word. I'm very touchy. I don't want to hear about it for another few months.
So long with this call without bringing up AMC.
I actually have a client who it's like the banner. It says it's a legacy edition of Pardot, and it doesn't have AMC enabled.
Ultimate.
So I can actually
not
turn it on.
I was gonna make.
I know. I'm like.
I was gonna make a joke.
This banner says turn it on, and I'm like, nope, not gonna do that.
I was gonna make a joke when Andrew said the golden record. I'm like, the golden record is when only one exists.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think maybe just to follow back up on the Zapier and Trade.io call out. I think those are great, stepping stones into the iPaaS category. They can certainly expose you and is, very, front end user friendly. But once you start getting to that enterprise level, like that of Amazon, where I'm at, the MuleSofts, the Informaticas, Dell Boomies of the world, that's like, in my opinion, that's what excites me about marketing operations, and seeing that trend towards that truly integrated platform and the capabilities that it can bring to your stack. It's acting as a power strip where all of your APIs plug in, it standardizes the data, and it's just, one big centralized push back and forth between that middleware layer and the map, and just the extensibility that it can bring as well. That's the stuff that I personally geek out on, and I see being the future of, marketing operations automation as a whole.
That's a great point. And I think that's definitely the point where people kind of go from kind of a baby marketing ops person who knows a little HTML, a little CSS, they've maybe dabbled in Zapier, to this, like, that they've leveled up. That is a true level up. Like, you are doing kind of data science almost in some ways, but you're pushing and pulling data at an enterprise level using tools that are not have a bit of a curve to them, a bit of a learning curve to them. Once you have to spend time with it to really learn it, and I think that is typically going to be an enterprise. It's going to be, but when you're in that role, the expectation is that you're going to A, want to learn it, B, know it, and C, pick it up quickly if you don't know it.
Yeah, I mean, it's about scale, right? So like the small startup may not even need a Zapier or a Trade.io. Mid-size would maybe leverage that fully, but then when you get up to enterprise, like the Amazons, I mean that's where you're getting the programs and the integrations at scale.
I think it's important too. I mean, you usually, at least in my experience as an enterprise, you aren't necessarily building the integrations themselves, depending upon what it is, right? Like, if it's like a Snowflake, it's like you probably would have an integrations team that's dedicated to Snowflake. So you don't need to know the extreme detail of that. It's just more of being able to speak with those people about things like the Pardot API or other APIs of other marketing solutions, to be able to explain to them, okay, here's what I need as the end product, and to be able to help solve for any like bugs they run into or any kind of questions they have about, okay, what object do I need to pull from, things like that. I haven't really found anyone in my experience who at the enterprise level is in marketing ops, but it is like building those integrations by themselves without like a Snowflake integrations person or something like that. So I do think that is like a little bit different. Whereas if you're working with something like a Workato or Trade.io, you tend to be building it yourself. So it's a little different there.
Yeah. And so I think what we're kind of, I mean, we're talking at a high level about some within the industry, fairly popular tools, Workato, Trade.io, Boomi, et cetera, Zapier. But I want to kind of take a couple of steps back, and for somebody who's trying to kind of figure out, kind of carve their path and figure out what it is that they need to learn. These are some of the things. You don't necessarily have to become an expert in these, but you should be knowledgeable. But what they are, a lot of what being in marketing ops is, and marketing automation and marketing technology, is spending time understanding the trends, understanding what people are using, like Snowflake and things like that. Things that are, I mean, you may get an opportunity to use them, you may not, but at least like if you get interviewed and you're saying, oh, hey, we're thinking about, we just onboarded Snowflake, like a good way to kind of present yourself as being someone who's knowledgeable is not necessarily say, oh, I've used it in the past, but saying, oh, that's cool. I've been reading about Snowflake. I read about XYZ, and be familiar enough with it to be able to speak about it and not just kind of look like, oh, that's weird. What's Snowflake? These are the things that like, that's how it's almost kind of a fake it till you make it, but it's like, it's not, I wouldn't fully say that, because when you're in the industry, when you're working in marketing ops, marketing technology, and those kind of ancillary roles, part of it is being familiar, like familiarizing yourself with the new tools, the new kind of emerging technology that you may find yourself working with. There's definitely a hunger to learn that kind of separates people from those that are going to move forward and move up in their career in this space versus those that are just kind of that. And that's not a knock on anybody, but that kind of is a guiding principle that pushes people forward. Is they know that it's ever evolving and they want to learn stuff, and that's something that carries them forward and makes them good candidates for future positions in more senior capacities.
In terms of career, I would also call out, it's not just knowing the tech, it's also knowing how to like advertise and market yourself. There are plenty of people who are absolutely brilliant, but they go into an interview and they fall apart. Like it's like almost like we talked about earlier, they get way too far into the weeds and they lose the hiring manager, or they just don't know how to explain or like kind of show like, hey, I can be at this higher level than I'm at now. Like, here's the experience I have, here's what I can bring to the table. And I think that's really important, because on the flip side, sometimes there are people who don't know the tech very well, but who are absolutely excellent at selling themselves. So I think that's something that's really important to build as a skill, is understanding your value, understanding how to present it consistently and how to explain it to other people, because you can know the tech day in and day out, but if you can't portray your value, then you can get lost and easily get kind of categorized into a bucket of like, oh, you only know this thing, so I'm not going to, consider you for that promotion or something like that. So that is a huge part of it too, in my opinion.
Yeah, I want to do a time check. So we're at thank you, Sarah. So we're at about 2 minutes till, and so I just want to kind of put this up here. This is for the panelists. If you have any interest in kind of connecting with them, you can find them here, whether it's on Twitter. If there's an at if there's an at icon or symbol, that's Twitter. So I will I want to kind of leave it open. If anybody here has any kind of last thoughts, parting advice, and I'll kind of start it in the order that I see them here. So I'll start with Stephen. Is there anything that you would like to kind of close on? Any thoughts you want to share?
I guess the most helpful thing within my career that kind of sparked it was working at an agency and just getting exposed to so many different things. I mean, that kind of helped me find my path. I'm probably more technical than most users, but just encourage everyone that, like, we're talking about APIs and we're in microservices and all this stuff. Like, you don't have to be an expert in all of those as a specialist. I mean, understanding the fundamentals, I think, is key, and most businesses aren't going to ask you to build some sort of API integration. So be curious. curious, ask a lot of questions in your existing roles, and learn what the pain points are of the business, and then try to figure out solutions. Most of my days solving solutions that I don't actually know the solution to. So I Google most. I put a comment in LinkedIn the other day about I'm Chief Google Officer. I mean, we're solving problems that a business may have never solved before. So just be curious, ask questions, and learn what's important to everybody else, and then solve those problems.
Awesome. All right, Sarah, you're up.
I would say learn to market yourself and sell yourself. That's huge. Network. I really am a huge believer, and I think it was Jill Rowley of Marketo fame who said, your network is your net worth. So really, things like joining the Slack groups, getting to know more and more people in the space. Those are people that you can bounce ideas off of. And of course, you also want to try to help them with their issues too, and have it be like reciprocal. But I think that's huge, because there have just been countless times where I'm like, hey, I'm about to, make this update. Has anyone else done it already? And kind of learn about the bugs or things to look out for. Or sometimes, honestly, if I hear that it's like a mess and there are a lot of bugs to work through, I'll like put it off another month and just kind of let the business know, hey, we're just going to avoid all of this kind of drama around it. Let's put it off. So really just networking and learning to sell yourself, I would say, are the two biggest things that have been helpful in my career.
Awesome. Thank you, Sarah. All right, Andrew, final thoughts?
Yeah, I would say, taking it one step further on the networking side, making sure that, you build long-lasting relationships, friendships with folks within Salesforce themselves. I mean, I've been fortunate throughout my time over the last 12 years or so, where it's almost cyclical, where I end up having the great opportunity of working again in various different capacities and roles with folks that have, lived within Salesforce, worked within Salesforce, and, that's come back around when opportunities might arise, or, they've moved on to a different area of, the portfolio that is Salesforce. Maybe they started off in Pardot, but now they've moved on to Marketing Cloud or MuleSoft. And keeping those lines open are, it's a great resource to have in your pocket. So there's definitely the Pardot community, which we're all a part of, but also the more immediate circle that is Salesforce. And I think maybe the last item to close out on from a leveling up perspective, look what Pardot can do outside of just Engagement Studio. What are some cool things that maybe you don't realize are possible with Pardot? Finding opportunities to send emails via the API instead for a specific use case, or finding a hack, around Pardot. That was one of the ways that I got my start, was breaking some of the limitations of the original drip campaign solution that predates Engagement Studio. And before Pardot was able to recognize opportunities and opportunity stages, how to use dynamic lists based off of score to act as that intermediary going from one stage to the next, things like that. There's so much stuff that you can do with Pardot that's creative and can also provide that value. And then that's also something you can hang your hat on and be able to add to your resume.
Awesome. All right. Thank you for that, Andrew. Laura?
When thinking about careers, don't wait for somebody to hand you a promotion. Go to your manager and say, hey, 3 months until my 1-year review, I definitely want to connect with you on what are you looking for me to take the next step in my career. Be upfront that you're looking for more money, you're looking for a better title. It is a normal part of job hunting to do this. And it's also normal for your company to not bring it up and kind of let you think that everything is the status quo. We were all kind of sold on this concept of like, oh, they'll recognize our hard work and promote me on my own merits. But like, let's face it, that doesn't happen. And that's why you find yourself at a company years upon years upon years without a promotion, without a pay increase. That's why when you change companies, you frequently make more money. Don't be afraid to do those investigations and to go out there. and look for those things. And don't be afraid to negotiate for a salary increase at your current job, but also as you change jobs. I'm going to plug, I really love advice columnists. I really love Ask a Manager. She has her own website, and she's an HR professional who gives advice on careers, dealing with coworkers, but also writing cover letters, writing resumes, and more. And so I'll highly recommend her content. Check out her blog for advice about how to position yourself and how to write a resume and how to start these conversations with your boss.
That was some excellent advice. Thank you. Brittany?
Yeah, I just want to reiterate, don't be afraid to leave in a current employer if they're not giving you that growth opportunity. I think especially in marketing operations, like it's changing every day, and don't be afraid to explore new opportunities. Also, when you're solutioning things out, write them down. I know that helps for me. When I have a win and I figured something out, I write it down, or I write a blog post, or I share it with the community. I think it's really important that we have this type of community to share, wins, losses, mess ups, things like that, successes. So get out there in the community and share your wins with everyone.
Absolutely. And that's a great point, Brittany, around the idea of like, loyalty is important, but it's also loyalty kind of to a point. I mean, you ultimately will know or understand what the industry is doing, what the trends are like. I mean, especially if you have friends in the industry and they'd say, oh yeah, I started this new job, and that you're pretty much aligned with their skill set and background, and it's like, oh my God, they got a 30, 40% raise. How is that possible? And then you start realizing, okay, they may be kind of sandbagging me here at my current role. I've asked, and it's just not going anywhere. You ultimately have to kind of do what's right for you, and if they should understand that. It's never an easy conversation, but to Laura's point, you also to kind of cover your bases, and feel like you've done the due diligence. You also should ask for it, not necessarily say pay me 40% more than you are today, but like make it a point to, after, whether it's to have communicated that early on, saying my intention is to be promoted, and and bring it up. What is it that you're looking for in this person? Constantly make them aware of the fact that this is, whether it's like in your one-on-ones or in your annual reviews, ask about these things. And because they won't necessarily, some will, but a lot won't. They won't say, hey, I'm looking for this in my end to make you a manager or make you the senior this or senior that. You've got to say, this is what I want. This is, help me understand what it is that I need to do to be that person. And if they're evasive or they don't really answer it, then that tells you a lot right there. All right. And then last but certainly not least, Julia, thoughts you want to share?
I want to echo a lot of what was said. It's advocating for yourself. I think part of it is establishing a strong personal brand. So even internally and externally, just that's going to take you when it comes to negotiating or being indispensable. Just you can build on that brand and reputation, but just think about what is it that I want to put my personal brand on. And it could be dependability, it could be something I'm always dependable and detail oriented, but whatever that may be, I think it's important to write it down. Like Brittany said, have your own internal resume at work, and you can always bring that up in negotiations or conversations.
Absolutely. All tremendous advice. And I'm really glad that we have a recording of it, because I'm sure that this will be valuable for people, others who weren't able to be here but are able to watch the recording. Well, I want to thank everyone who was able to come on here and take part in this panel. You've all given tremendous advice and answered a lot of really great questions. So I want to thank you for taking time out of your personal schedule. In a lot of cases, this is after work, so you guys have worked a full day, and or some that just took out and now they're going back to work. But either way, thank you so much for doing this. This was a tremendous give back to the entire community. And I just want to, again, thank you so much for doing this. And hopefully we'll have a chance to get together soon to do something similar like this.
Thank you for putting this together, Ben.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And for the attendees, thank you for joining, for being a part of this. I hope this was helpful to you. And yeah, like I said, keep an eye out for the other ones that I'll be the other panel sessions around nonprofits, Pardot and nonprofits, Pardot and education, and Pardot as a consultant. Thank you again, and have a good rest of your day. Bye.
Sure.